like sharp minds, brewed hot sherbra. No sugar, no filter. Sip, think, repeat, repeat, repeat.
Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. And today we're going to kind of take you to a specific place and time, Animangapop Cardiff 2024. But we're not just going to talk about the event itself. We're using it as a way to understand the wider world of Japanese pop culture. So we've got articles, we've got forum discussions, we've even got the economic reports are a real mix to try and get a full picture of this. So are you ready to geek out a little bit?
Oh, absolutely. And what's so interesting is how this event, while it's obviously focused on Cardiff, really reflects a global trend that we're seeing. So it's kind of like Animangapop is like a microcosm, a little tiny version of this much bigger thing that's happening. And when we start to unpack that, that's when things get really, really fascinating.
Okay, so paint me a picture here. June 1st, Future in Cardiff Bay, thousands of fans all dressed up, competing, basically, living and breathing anime, and the energy, just from what I've read, is incredible.
It reminds me a lot of that early Comic-Con footage, before it became this huge media thing. There's a kind of rawness to it, a pure enthusiasm at Animangapop that is just infectious. And I think it really speaks to the power of these subcultures to really build community.
And it's not just about watching, is it? We've got some stuff here about these intense Super Smash Bros. And Street Fighter tournaments happening. They almost sound more like World Cup finals than just casual gaming.
Oh, yeah. The competitive spirit is definitely there. But what I find really interesting is how these events act as these cultural exchanges. So you've got these panels on industry trends, discussions about, the creative process. It's like fandom, but with this extra layer of critical thinking, which I think often gets overlooked.
So it's not just about loving Dragon Ball. It's about understanding the why, how the cultural context, the techniques they use to tell stories, all of that.
Exactly. And that's where understanding the wider history of these anime and manga conventions is really key, because Animangapop isn't just this one-off event. It's part of a much longer story that you could argue started with Comiket in Japan back in the 70s, and then we see Anime Expo blowing up in the U.S. Femini, Japan Expo becoming huge in Europe. So it's this pattern of local fandom connecting to a global phenomenon.
Okay, so I'm starting to see the bigger picture here, but why Japanese pop culture in particular? What is it about anime and manga and J-pop and video games? What makes these things so globally appealing?
I mean, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? I think part of it is just how easy it is to get. Now streaming services have totally changed the game, because now you don't need to be in Tokyo to experience the latest thing. But I think it also goes deeper than just convenience.
Yeah, I was going to say, there has to be something about the content itself that people connect with, right? Like, Demon Slayer is insanely popular, but why?
Here's the thing that I find really interesting. A lot of these stories, even though they're set in these fantastical worlds, they're often dealing with really universal themes. Love loss, growing up, fighting against being treated unfairly. They tap into something really fundamental about what it means to be human, regardless of where you come from.
So even though I'm not a demon slayer in feudal Japan, I can still understand those struggles, those emotions. It's like a cultural translation is happening through the storytelling.
That's a great way to put it. And we can't forget the power of the visuals.
Yeah.
Anime has this really distinct style. It's so recognizable. There's a kind of energy to it, an expressiveness that I don't think you always get in Western animation. It just grabs you and pulls you into the story.
And then you've got the music, the fashion. It's this whole aesthetic universe. It's like, I might not understand every single word in a J-pop song, but the energy, the feeling it gives off, that's universal.
Yeah, it really taps into this desire for something new, something different. And I think for a lot of people, Japanese pop culture offers this sense of escape. It's a chance to step outside of what you know and experience something totally unique.
But wouldn't you say it's also influencing what we think of as normal? I mean, look at the impact anime has had on Hollywood, on video games. It's not just its own separate world anymore. It's blending into everything.
I think that's where things get super interesting because, there wouldn't be The Matrix without Ghost in the Shell, and the influence is even bigger than just direct copies. It's in the way things look, the techniques they use to tell stories, the way they blend technology and fantasy. It's subtle, but it's definitely there.
Okay, so we've got this event, Animangapop, which is like this little window into this massive cultural force, this Japanese pop culture thing. It's everywhere. It's visually amazing. It's tapping into some deep stuff. But is it just a trend? Is this a fad, or are we seeing something that's going to stick around?
That's a question we're definitely going to dig into. Is this a temporary blip, Or are we seeing a change in how we consume and create entertainment? And from what we've got here, the signs are pointing to something much more lasting.
All right, so we're about to get into the nitty-gritty here, but before we do, let's take a step back and really try to unpack what makes Japanese pop culture tick. Where does it come from? What are the key ingredients? And how has it changed over time?
Those are great questions. And the stuff we've got here has some really fascinating insights. Buckle up because things are about to get interesting.
All right, so we kind of established that this Japanese pop culture thing is a pretty big deal, but I think it's easy to get caught up in the flashiness, the cool visuals, the catchy music. But where does this stuff even come from? Like, what are the roots?
That's where getting into like the cultural background is super important. One of the articles actually talks about the influence of Shintoism, Japan's like original religion, and how that's influenced storytelling. Like the idea of spirits being in everyday objects, nature is this powerful force. Those ideas come up again and again in anime and manga.
So it's almost like these old beliefs are getting a new life through modern entertainment, which is really cool. I never thought about it that way.
And then you've got the historical epics, the samurai stories, all the folklore that gets mixed in there too. It's this constant back and forth between the past and the present. And I think that gives it this depth that you don't always see in other places.
Okay, so it's not just random stuff they're pulling out of thin air. There's a real lineage going on. But how do we go from those traditional stories to like giant robots and aliens and all that?
That's where the time after World War II gets really interesting because Japan is going through all these massive changes.
Yeah.
Like society, technology, everything's in flux. And you
Yeah.
really see that reflected. The art manga just explodes in popularity and anime starts to find its feet.
So it's like an outlet for processing those changes, expressing anxieties and hopes in a new way.
Exactly. And then on top of that, you've got the economic boom in the 80s and 90s. Japan becomes this tech giant. And that feeds this whole new wave of creativity. So you've got cyberpunk anime like Akira and video games like Final Fantasy pushing the limits of what you can do.
Right. So it's like each era is adding its own unique spice to the mix. But if we had to nail down like the core elements, what makes Japanese pop culture stand out? What's that secret ingredient that gives it that distinct flavor?
One thing that really jumps out is the focus on telling stories visually. Even in manga, which is black and white, there's this crazy attention to detail, the way they use the panels, the characters' expressions. It's a masterclass in showing, not telling.
And you've got those classic character types, right? The quiet hero, the mischievous one, the strong female characters, those recurring personalities that pop up in different genres.
Yeah, definitely. They draw on those universal archetypes, but filter them through a Japanese lens. And I think that mix of familiarity with the newness of the setting is part of what draws people in, is like comfort food, but with a twist.
And speaking of comfort food, I got to ask about the music. J-pop is huge, but it's more than just pop, right? You've got rock, electronic music, even traditional folk music influencing things.
It's a really diverse landscape, and the music often works like this emotional booster for the visuals. It's not just background noise, it's a key part of the experience, like those epic orchestral soundtracks in anime, or the way a J-rock song can perfectly capture that teenage angst.
Right, it's like a soundtrack for your feelings. But let's zoom out for a second. We've been down in the details here. How do all these things, the history, the visuals, the music, how does that all add up to the global appeal we were talking about earlier?
I think it creates this feeling of being fully immersed in something that's really powerful. You're not just watching a show or playing a game. You're stepping into a whole world with its own rules, its own logic.
And that world, even if it's totally fantastical, still has something you can relate to, right? Like if I'm watching Attack on Titan with these giant creatures destroying everything, it's tapping into that basic human fear of the unknown.
Exactly. And that's where the skill of the creators comes in. They take these universal anxieties, fears, hopes, dreams, and they present them in a way that's both entertaining and makes you think.
So it's escapism, but with some depth. Like I can binge Demon Slayer and feel like I went on an adventure, but maybe I've also learned something about myself along the way.
That's the magic formula, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I think that's where Japanese pop culture often hits the mark. It doesn't shy away from complicated stuff, but it makes those complexities engaging, almost addictive.
And maybe that's why it's not just kids who are into it. You've got adults cosplaying at Animangapop, right? It's like that childhood sense of wonder never goes away.
It speaks to the power of these stories to stick with us, to change as we change, and I think that's something worth celebrating.
Okay, but with all this talk of global appeal and impact, is it all positive? Are there downsides to Japanese pop culture's rise? Are there any costs?
That's a good point, and something our sources don't avoid. There are definitely criticisms out there, and it's important to acknowledge those too. Not everything is perfect in this world, even if it has giant robots and magical girls.
Right, let's not sugarcoat it. What are some of the less glamorous sides of this whole thing? Where do things get a bit more messy?
Well, for one, there's the issue of cultural appropriation. As Japanese pop culture becomes more mainstream, there's always a risk of things being taken out of context or misused or even mocked.
Yeah, so it's like walking this tightrope between sharing something you love and seeing it potentially twisted or misunderstood. That's tricky.
And then there's the question of who's represented within the industry itself. While there are strong female characters and LGBTQ plus themes explored in some anime and manga, it's still largely dominated by men. And some people argue that it needs more diversity.
So like any creative field, there's progress, but there's still room for improvement in terms of inclusivity and making sure a wider range of voices are heard.
Exactly. And I think it's important to have these discussions to keep pushing the industry forward, even while we celebrate the good stuff.
Okay, so we've got the good, the bad, and the complicated. But even with those challenges, the fact that we're having this conversation, that Japanese pop culture is making people think and talk, that's gotta mean something, right?
Absolutely. It shows just how much impact it has, its ability to challenge our assumptions.
Yeah.
And that's definitely worth recognizing.
So where do we go from here? We've looked at the history, the core elements, the global clover reach, the controversies. What does the future hold for this world that never seems to stop changing?
That's where we get to speculate a bit, but I think the sources give us some clues to work with, and trust me, the future looks anything but boring.
All right, so we've done a lot of talking about the past, history, cultural roots, all that. But what about the future of Japanese pop culture? What's coming next? What should we be looking out for?
Well, one thing that really stands out from all this stuff we've been looking at is the rise of these international collaborations. We're seeing more and more Japanese anime studios teaming up with those big Western streaming services like Netflix and Amazon.
So it's not just about bringing Japanese shows over here, but actually making new stuff together. That's really interesting.
Yeah, exactly. And it's creating this really cool mix of styles and storytelling. You've got things like Castlevania, where they've taken this classic Japanese video game and given it this dark gothic anime look and feel, but it's made for a Western audience.
Yeah, that's kind of blurring the lines in a really cool way. But does that mean we'll see less of that, like, distinctly Japanese feel in the future? Like, is everything going to become kind of the same?
That's a good question, and it's something that comes up in some of these online discussions too. But the interesting thing is that a lot of times these collaborations actually end up highlighting what makes Japanese storytelling so unique. It's like by putting it in a new setting, those core elements become even more obvious.
So maybe it's less about losing that Japanese identity and more about it changing and evolving through these new partnerships.
I think that's a great way to think about it. And of course, we can't forget about technology. VR and AR are mentioned in pretty much every article as having huge potential for the future.
I can only imagine. I mean, think about actually being able to step into the world of your favorite anime, talking to the characters, feeling the wind as you fly next to a dragon. That's a whole other level of being part of the story.
And it's not just about passively watching or reading anymore. We're seeing more games where players can create their own stuff within those worlds. That kind of interactivity could totally change the game.
It's both exciting and a little scary at the same time, right? Like if those lines between what's real and what's not keep getting blurry, where does that leave us?
That's a big question, maybe one for another deep dive.
Oh, cool.
But in a more practical sense, I think it opens up so many creative doors, and it also connects back to something we talked about earlier, the way these stories bring people together.
Yeah, even now you've got fan art, cosplay, online communities. So many ways for people to connect because they love this stuff.
Exactly. And now imagine that expanded in a virtual world, people from all over the globe meeting up in a virtual space, going to a virtual concert, dressing up as their favorite characters.
Right.
The possibilities for connecting with others are just massive.
So maybe the future of Japanese pop culture isn't just about the content itself, but about the way that content helps people connect with each other.
I think you've hit the nail on the head there, and it points to something even deeper. I think in a world that often feels so divided, these shared experiences, these stories that go beyond borders, they give us a bit of hope, a reminder that we're all human.
That's a really powerful thought. So even if we never get real life giant robots, even if we don't all end up living in some virtual anime world, the impact of Japanese pop culture is something that will stick with us.
Absolutely. It's changed how we see entertainment, how we tell stories, even how we relate to each other. And that influence is only going to get stronger.
Well, I think we've finally reached the bottom of this deep dive. We've explored the amazing world of Animangapop Cardiff, unpack the history and culture behind Japanese pop culture, and even taken a glimpse into what the future might hold. It's been quite a journey.
It has. It's been fascinating to see how something that might seem like a niche interest has blown up into this global phenomenon and one that keeps changing in surprising ways.
So for anyone listening who might be new to all of this, where would you even suggest they start?
Honestly, just follow your curiosity. Find a manga series that grabs your attention. Watch a Studio Ghibli movie. Try out a classic video game. There's a whole universe of incredible stories out there waiting to be discovered.
And for those who are already big fans, what's one thing you'd want them to take away from this deep dive?
Remember why you fell in love with this stuff in the first place. That sense of wonder, the excitement, the feeling of being connected to something bigger than yourself. Hold on to that and let it guide you as you keep exploring all the amazing things this world has to offer.
That's a great way to put it. And on that note, I think it's time to wrap things up. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the world of Japanese pop culture. It's been an absolute pleasure to explore these ideas with you.
The pleasure was all mine. Until next time, keep those imaginations going and never stop exploring.
Cappuccino, white crock, mine's brewed hot, served raw. No sugar, no filter. Sip, think, repeat, repeat, repeat.